The wind carried dust and death that day. A lone wagon sat half buried in sand and sun, its wheel cracked, its canvas peeled back like old skin. Beside it lay a body, a woman, sun-bleached and still, her arms stretched protectively over the small form of a girl. Lena didn't cry anymore. The tears had stopped 2 days ago. Her eyes were hollow, too dry for grief now. Her legs were pulled up to her chest, her face scorched, her lips cracked white. In one hand she gripped a limp cloth doll, its button eyes faded, the seams opened at the shoulder. Overhead crows circled lazily. The girl blinked against the sunlight as a new shadow crawled across the dirt. Hooves. Slow, deliberate. A tall figure on horseback, dust trailing behind him like a ghost. He came alone. No wagon, no partners, no words. He didn't call out, didn't ask who she was. He simply reined in his horse about 20 paces out and stared. He was a silhouette at first. The wide-brimmed hat, the duster coat, the rifle slung behind the saddle, a silent shape carved against the horizon. When he finally dismounted, his boots struck the dirt like soft thunder. Lena didn't flinch. He walked past her without speaking, knelt beside the woman's body. For a moment, he just looked. Then gently, he placed 2 fingers over her eyes and closed them. Dust moved, around them like breath. He stood and turned to Lena, reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a metal canteen, unscrewed the lid, held it out. She didn't move. Drink. His voice was quiet, deep but weathered, like dry timber in the cold. She reached slowly. The first sip made her gag. Her throat forgot how to swallow. But she drank again, greedily, eyes fluttering with something like relief. He let her finish half before capping it and setting it beside her. Then, wordless again, he returned to the horse and took out a folding spade. He began to dig. The sun climbed higher, punishing. His coat darkened with sweat. Every motion was measured, practiced. The grave took shape steadily, clean lines, proper depth. No ceremony, just respect. Lena sat still as stone. When it was done, he lifted the woman gently into his arms. Her dress was torn, her feet bare. Lena stood now, doll still in hand. He laid the body into the earth, smoothed her hair, and stepped back. "Say anything?" he asked, not looking at her. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. He nodded once, shoveled dirt back in. When he was done, he placed a flat stone at the head and tied a red scrap of cloth around it, a mark of memory or maybe just color for the crows. Then he returned to his horse, adjusted the saddle, and turned to leave, but paused, looked over his shoulder. She hadn't moved. He took out a wool blanket, walked back, dropped it at her feet. Lena stared at him. Dust blew across her cheeks. She stood. He turned again and walked toward his horse. She followed without a word. He mounted, offered her a hand. She didn't take it, just climbed the stirrup herself, shaky but determined, sat behind him. The horse began to move. Behind them, the grave faded into the waves of heat. They rode in, silence, no name, no questions, no promises. Lena clutched her doll. The trail stretched wide and empty before them. Later, by firelight, as coyotes howled in the dark distance, she sat cross-legged across from him while he stirred something in a pot. The first stars blinked awake overhead. Lena's voice was quiet, more breath than sound. "Are you gonna sell me?" The man didn't look up. He tore a piece of bread and held it out to her. Then he stood, tossed a second blanket toward her, and settled back. Against his saddle, she stared at the bread, at the fire, at the stranger. He hadn't answered, but somehow, she didn't think he needed to. The trail blurred into sameness, days of heat, cold nights, silence. Lena rode behind him, her small arms wrapped around the saddle, cheek pressed, against the coarse canvas of his bedroll. She didn't ask where they were going, he never said. But she started to watch him. Every morning, he woke before the sun, checked his rifle, saddled the horse, and cleaned his knife like it was religion. She noticed things. How he always rode a little behind the ridgeline, how he circled the camp before sleeping, how he muttered under his breath when stitching his worn boot leather by lantern light. His hands were rough but careful. When he hunted, he took only what they needed. Rabbits, sometimes a bird. He gutted the kills without flinching, set traps, without hesitation, cleaned meat with slow, deliberate motion. He wasn't cruel, just quiet and careful. Sometimes at night she tried to talk. "Were you a soldier?" He looked up once, nodded. "Did you have a family?" He didn't respond. She saw the scars on his ribs when he stripped to wash in the creek. Long, jagged ones. Bullet marks. A blade wound across his shoulder. And then the other scars. The kind that didn't bleed. The way he sometimes stared too long into the fire. How his jaw clenched in his sleep. The way he never let his back face open ground. One dusk the land shifted. Greener. Steeper. They rode through a narrow pass between cliffs, the trail overgrown and hidden. At the end of it, wedged into the rock face like a secret, stood a small log cabin with moss on the roof and smoke stains on the chimney stone. She blinked. It felt like something from a dream. "This is yours?" she whispered. He just nodded, swung off the saddle, and began unloading gear. Inside was spare. One bed, a table, a shelf with tins and tools. She stood in the doorway like she didn't belong. He lit the hearth, started a fire, filled a tin kettle. Everything was rhythm, measured, like he'd lived this life for years in silence. That night, she dreamed of the ambush again, her father's voice shouting, "Get down!" Gunfire, hooves, her mother's hand across her mouth. She woke gasping, knees pulled to her chest, the fire nearly dead. She was cold. He was already up, fixing something near the hearth. Without a word, he draped his coat over her shoulders. She didn't say thank you. He didn't expect it. The next day she found her torn boots neatly stitched and drying near the fire. A little clumsily done, but whole. A small mended book lay next to them. Pilgrim's Almanac, 1857. Someone had underlined words inside. Fortitude, mercy, grit. She looked up at him. "You read?" He shrugged. "Some." Later, over stew, he gave her the bowl first. Pushed the biscuits toward her before serving himself. She didn't know what to say. Then the storm came. Thunder like cannon fire split the hills. Rain slammed the roof hard enough to shake loose the chimney soot. Wind howled through the rocks, like a voice calling in pain. Lena startled at every crack of lightning. When the door shook against its hinges, she ran toward him. Didn't mean to. Just did. Grabbed the side of his coat like it was the only stable thing in the world. He froze, then slowly rested a hand on her back, just one steady hand. They stayed like that until the storm passed. Later she stirred the fire and said softly, "You never told me your name." He didn't look at her right away. Then, in the quiet hush of the cabin, with only the rain dripping from the eaves, "Jessie," he said. She repeated it in her mind. Jessie. It fit. Strong. Simple. A little sad. That night, she fell asleep with the blanket tucked under her chin, the fire warm, her doll beside her. She didn't cry. Not once. The morning Jessie rode into town, the sky was cold and colorless. He packed light. Rifle, some pelts for trade, a list scrawled on the inside of his palm. Before leaving, he crouched beside Lena, where she sat feeding kindling into the hearth. "Stay. Inside. Keep the door barred. Don't answer to no one but me." She nodded. "How long?" 3 days if the mule don't drop dead." He hesitated. Then, to her surprise, he reached into his coat and handed her a pistol. Small, dusty, heavy in her palms. Loaded, he said. Point, squeeze. Don't hesitate. She looked up, startled. You trust me with this? He didn't answer, just nodded once, then mounted and rode off. The wind picked up that afternoon. Trees whispered things she didn't want to hear. The hills were too quiet. Even the birds seemed to vanish. By nightfall, she'd locked every window. Lit only one lamp. Then came the knock. Not Jesse's pattern. Lena froze. Voices outside, low, rough, laughing. One called out, "Come on now. Cabin like this don't build itself, someone's home." She backed away from the door. Another voice, gravelly, close. "Reckon we seen a girl looked just like the one from that wagon raid." Her heart stopped. That voice, that face. Flash in her mind. The bandana, the gold tooth, the spurs. He'd yanked her father off the wagon by his collar. Her hands shook. She grabbed the pistol. Floorboards creaked under her feet as she crept toward the bedroom. Climbed under the bed, eyes wide, breath caught in her chest. The door cracked, boots on the wood. Two shadows, heavy footsteps, loud laughter. She's got to be here. Glass shattered. Then, silence. Then a whisper of movement, like a wind that didn't belong. A shape darted through the doorway, not loud, not slow, just there. Then the first scream. A bandit dropped to the floor, throat opened cleanly. The second spun, too slow. An arrow pierced his side. He fired wildly into the dark. Bullets hit shelves. Sparks flew. He turned toward the bedroom. Lena gripped the frying pan, not the pistol. It had fallen somewhere. The man stepped forward. Crack. The pan slammed into his head. He fell like a tree. Silence returned, broken only by the ringing in her ears. A figure stepped into the flickering lamplight. A man, tall, lean, painted in ash and shadow. Braids tied behind his head. He wore no boots, only soft-soled moccasins. A knife in one hand, bow slung over his back. His face unreadable. Greyhawk, that's what Jesse would later call him. He met Lena's eyes but said nothing. Behind him the fire still crackled. The dead men bled into the floor. Then, hoofbeats. Jesse burst through the door, rifle drawn, blood soaking one sleeve. He took in the scene fast. The bodies, the girl, the warrior. His gaze steadied on Lena. "You hurt?" She shook her head. He swayed, slumped against the wall. Blood gushed freely from his side. Greyhawk caught him before he fell, easing him down. Jesse tried to speak, but the warrior shook his head, pressed a hand over the wound. "Don't move." The voice was calm. English, barely accented. Lena rushed to Jesse's side. "You're bleeding bad." "I noticed." Jesse mumbled, jaw clenched. Greyhawk worked quickly. Herbs, strips of cloth, flint blade to clean the edges. Jesse winced but didn't fight it. Afterward, they sat in silence. Outside, the bodies cooled in the dirt. Greyhawk offered them shelter. His tribe was days away, but he had a hunting camp nearby. "Safe there," he said. Jesse hesitated, pride deep in his gut. Then he looked at Lena. Pale, shaken, holding the frying pan like it was holy. He nodded. They traveled slowly. Greyhawk led. Jesse on a makeshift sled, too weak to ride. Lena beside him. At the hunting camp, hidden beneath cedar and cliff. Greyhawk laid Jesse near the fire, treated him with practiced hands. Lena watched every movement. How the warrior never wasted emotion. How he spoke little like Jesse. But differently. Not silence from pain, but from peace. That night, Lena sat beside Greyhawk and whispered, "Thank you." He nodded once, then asked, "You scared?" She nodded. He handed her a carved piece of wood, shaped like a hawk, smooth and warm. "My mother gave it to me," he said, "when I was small and scared of wolves." She held it like treasure, Later she laughed, not loud but real, when Greyhawk showed her how to start a fire with a bow drill and it sparked too fast, setting Jesse's blanket on fire for a moment. Jesse grunted, too weak to move. "Your aim's still off," he muttered. It was the first time Lena saw a smile tug at his mouth. Later she brought him water. He drank, then said, soft as smoke, "Thank you." Lena looked up. The way he said it, not like a man returning a favor, but like someone seeing something beautiful and fragile and knowing he didn't deserve it. It was the first time his voice had warmth, and the first time she realized he wasn't just protecting her, he was healing too. By early spring, the Isai trees were coming back to life, and so was Jesse. His limp faded. The color returned to his face. He still moved like a man carved from stone, but now the stone had warmth behind it. The scar on his side itched, which Greyhawk said meant the healing had begun. Lena had changed too. She could ride without being led now, balanced straight-backed in the saddle with her feet tucked just right. Greyhawk had taught her to move quiet, through the woods, to notch an arrow and release it smooth. She'd caught her first rabbit last week. Jesse had skinned it while pretending not to look impressed. He'd started calling her Kid, just once, but she never forgot it. Sometimes. He watched her across the firelight and didn't say a word, just nodded once. Not approval, not praise. Something deeper, like trust. One morning, Jesse handed her the old revolver. Time to learn. Her hands trembled at first, but he didn't rush her, just stood behind her, calm, steady. Breathe, out before you squeeze. The first shot missed the tin can by a mile, the second hit it square. She turned, glowing. He grunted, "Lucky." But the corner of his mouth twitched upward. Then, smoke, a dark column rising from the valley, twisting like a snake into the sky. Lena reined her horse beside Jesse's. "What is it?" He narrowed his eyes. Wagon fire. Greyhawk came, up beside them, already stringing his bow. Jesse turned his horse away. "We don't owe him." Lena stared at him, quietly, then said, "If you hadn't stopped, I'd be dead too." Jesse didn't move. The silence stretched, then he exhaled long, slow. "Let's go." They rode hard, down the ridge, across the dry stream bed, toward the fire. Gunfire cracked through the trees. Screams. A wagon burned in the center of the clearing. 2 horses lay dead. 3 raiders circled. Masks, rifles, spit-laced laughter. Jesse didn't wait. He dropped from the saddle and fired, took one through the leg. Greyhawk vanished into the trees. Lena froze, then spotted something. 2 children. A boy and a girl cowering beneath the burning wagon bed. She leapt down, crawled fast. Smoke bit her lungs. A bullet shattered the wagon rail above her head. She reached the kids. Come on. The boy hesitated. Then, a sharp whistle. Greyhawk's arrow buried into the bandit's neck. The girl screamed. Lena grabbed both their hands and pulled them toward the woods. Behind her, Jesse reloaded, blood on his cheek, teeth clenched. The last bandit lunged at him, then paused. Recognition. Well, I'll be. He grinned. That little girl from the plains. Jesse stiffened. It was him. The gold tooth. The leader. The man who left Lena's family bleeding under the sun. You got a taste for orphans now, huh? The bandit jeered. Guess we both picked through the same trash. Jesse raised his gun. His finger hovered on the trigger, but he didn't fire. Not yet. Lena stepped from behind the trees, rifle in hand, barrel trembling. The bandit saw her and laughed. Ain't you grown? Still dragging that doll around? Lena's hands shook. She aimed. Jesse said nothing. She took a breath, lowered the rifle. You're not worth the bullet. The bandit didn't laugh this time. Greyhawk stepped from the shadows behind him, knife at the ready. The man ran. Jesse didn't follow. They let him go. That night they camped high above the valley. The rescued children were asleep under borrowed blankets. Jesse sat beside the fire, staring into the embers. Greyhawk had already melted into the woods again. Lena sat beside him. Her own horse now stood tethered nearby, a roan mare Jesse had bartered for with his last rifle. He handed her a cup of warm tea. She sipped, then looked at him. "You were gonna shoot him," he didn't answer. "You didn't." He nodded once. She smiled. He looked at her. Not the child from the trail, not the girl with the doll. A rider, his equal. She reached into her coat and pulled out the small wooden hawk Greyhawk had given her, held it up to the firelight. "Think it means I'm not scared anymore?" Jesse looked at the carving, then at her. "No," he said softly. "It means you're still here." They didn't say much after that. Didn't need to. The fire burned low. The moon rose high. They would ride again tomorrow. Not as strangers, not even as family, but as something stronger, the kind of bond born on the edge of the world, where names don't matter as much as who still rides beside you. As the screen fades, Lena's voice returns, soft as dusk. "He never said much, but he gave me something bigger than words and a second chance."